You know, when we think about the great minds of history, we usually picture these solitary geniuses, right? But sometimes the people who change the world aren't the inventors, but the connectors, the ones who build the bridges so knowledge can get from one place to another. Today, we're talking about one of the most important and maybe one of the most forgotten knowledge brokers in all of history. So let's start with a question. How did algebra get from Baghdad to Europe? I mean, think about it. All that advanced math from the Islamic Golden Age, stuff we completely take for granted, it didn't just magically show up. Someone had to carry it. So how did this cornerstone of modern science actually make that journey? Well, the answer isn't so much a what as it is a who. It all comes down to one man, a forgotten genius from 12th century Barcelona who stood right at the crossroads of cultures, languages, and ideas. And he built the bridge that would end up changing everything. All right, here's our plan. First, we're going to meet this incredible person and see the world he lived in. Then we'll dive into how he basically created a whole new language for science. After that, we'll see the mathematical bridge he built to Europe, explore how he wrestled with the big questions of faith in the cosmos, and finally, we'll really get a handle on the massive legacy he left behind. Okay, first up, let's jump back in time to the 12th century and meet the man at the very center of our story. So who was Abraham Barhea? Well, he was a true polymath, a brilliant mathematician, an astronomer, and a philosopher. And he wasn't some scholar locked away in a tower either. He held these really high-ranking titles, Nasi, which means prince, and Savazorda, which actually comes from an Arabic title that's kind of like chief of police or governor. So what does that tell us? It tells us he was a major player in his community, deeply connected to the world around him, and in the perfect spot to be an interpreter, a cultural bridge. And to really get why he's so important, you have to understand the world he was living in. On one hand, you had the Islamic world, deep in its scientific golden age, with these huge libraries just packed with knowledge. On the other hand, you had Christian Europe, where a lot of that ancient wisdom had been lost. Europe was just at the very beginning of a scientific reawakening. There was this huge knowledge gap, and Abraham Barhia was standing right in the middle of it. So you've got this massive gap. How on earth does one person even begin to bridge it? Well, for Barhea, it all started with language. And we don't have to guess why he did it. These are his own words. He saw that his Jewish brethren, especially in places like France, were totally cut off from all the scientific breakthroughs happening in the Arabic-speaking world. He didn't see himself as some big inventor. His goal was to be a popularizer, to make all this crucial knowledge accessible to his own community. And the problem he was tackling was, well, it was stark. At the time, if you wanted to study advanced mathematics or astronomy, you had to read Arabic, period. But in Hebrew, the language of his people, there was basically nothing. He wasn't just translating a few things, he was trying to fill this enormous void. And this is the really incredible part. It meant he had to do more than just write books. Barhiya literally had to invent the language of science in Hebrew. He was coming up with the actual words, the terminology for maths and astronomy and philosophy. He was a true linguistic trailblazer, laying the groundwork for centuries of scientific thought. Okay, so he's building this new scientific language. Now let's see what he did with it, because this is where we find his most direct, world-changing contribution. A bridge made of numbers. All right, quick flashback to high school math. The quadratic equation. You definitely remember it. But it's not just for homework. It's absolutely essential for everything from engineering and physics to modern finance. It's a true cornerstone of algebra. And here it is. This is the big one. In his Hebrew book, which translates to something like Treatise on Measurement and Calculation, Abraham Barhia laid out the first complete solution to the general quadratic equation ever seen in Europe. This was a monumental leap, a total game changer for European mathematics. And you can literally trace the path of this idea through history. It's so cool. Around 1136, Barhia writes his book in Hebrew. Then, in 1145, his colleague Plato of Tivoli translates it into Latin. And then, get this, almost a century later, the legendary mathematician Fibonacci himself uses that Latin translation as a major source for his own famous work. It's a direct, clear-as-day line from Barcelona to the heart of the European Renaissance. But here's the thing, Barhia wasn't just a math whiz, he was also a really deep thinker who was trying to connect science, philosophy, and his own Jewish faith. His philosophy was built on Neoplatonism. The basic idea is that matter on its own is just potential. It's nothing, really. It's form that comes along and gives it actual existence. And the human soul? He saw it as this special kind of form, caught between two worlds. It could rise up to seek eternal wisdom, or it could fall and just chase after the temporary stuff of the material world. And he even applied this thinking to everyday life, outlining what he saw as three paths for a pious person. First, there's the totally devoted person who lives apart from the world. Then there's the holy community, which participates in the world but lives strictly by divine law. And finally, there's the kingdom of justice, people who not only live righteously but actively work to make the world a better, more just place for everyone. And this is where you really see the 12th century mind at work. Barhea, like a lot of thinkers back then, saw zero conflict between hard science and mysticism. He was a big believer in astrology, and he used his incredible astronomical skills and his deep knowledge of scripture to calculate the exact year he believed the Messiah would arrive, 1358. It's just a fascinating look into a mind that saw the cosmos as both a math problem and a divine message. So let's pull all this together. What is the lasting legacy of this incredible thinker, the man they called Salva Sorda? Well, his legacy is just staggering when you lay it all out like this. He was the first to write these kinds of scientific books in Hebrew, the first to bring the complete quadratic equation to Europe. He was a vital bridge that let Islamic science flow into the Christian world. And on top of all that, he was a pioneering philosopher. He didn't just participate in history, he was a channel that made history happen. Which kind of leaves us with one last thought. Abraham Barhea's real genius wasn't just about knowing things. It was about connecting things. He stood between worlds and built a bridge. And it really makes you wonder, in our own era, with all of our information bubbles and cultural divides, who are the modern-day Salva Sordas? Who are the knowledge brokers building the bridges that we need today?